You will spend the rest of your life in prison. May God have mercy on your soul.
But I didn't mean...
November 3rd, 1998, was a Tuesday afternoon in Jacksonville, Florida. The weather was warm 78 degrees with clear skies, the kind of perfect autumn day that made children eager to play outside after school. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Lakewood, located on Jacksonville's south side, kids rode bikes, played basketball, and enjoyed the last hour of daylight before dinner time. Lakewood was the epitome of middle-class suburban America in the late 1990s. Tree-lined streets with modest ranch-style homes built in the 1970s, manicured lawns, American flags on front porches, basketball hoops in driveways. It was a neighborhood where people knew their neighbors, where children played freely, where crime was virtually non-existent. The kind of place families moved to specifically because it was safe. At 4501 Glendale Avenue, a small single-story house with pale yellow siding and a well-maintained lawn, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton was getting restless. She'd arrived home from Southside Elementary School at 3:30 p.m., had a snack of graham crackers and apple juice, and finished her homework, a simple math worksheet and spelling words. Now, at 5:15 p.m., with the sun still high in the November sky, Maddie wanted to go outside and play. Madeline Ann Clifton was born on March 12, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to Lawrence and Sheila Clifton. She had an older brother, Jesse, who was 14, and an older sister, Patricia, who was 16. Maddie was petite for her age, barely 4 feet tall, and weighing just 52 pounds, with long brown hair that her mother usually styled in a ponytail, bright hazel eyes that sparkled with mischief and joy, and a smile that could light up a room. She had a gap between her 2 front teeth that made her smile even more endearing. Maddie was in 3rd grade at Southside Elementary, where she was known as the class chatterbox, always talking, always laughing, always making friends. Her teacher, Mrs. Patricia Morgan, described her as a social butterfly who never met a stranger. Maddie loved art class, hated math, adored animals. She desperately wanted a puppy, but her parents said no, and had an extensive collection of stuffed animals that covered her bed. Her favorite was a worn teddy bear named Mr. Snuggles that she'd had since she was 2. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Maddie was bored. Her siblings were both at after-school activities, Jessie at football practice, Patricia at cheerleading, and her mother, Sheila, was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Sheila Clifton was a registered nurse at Baptist Medical Center, working 3 12-hour shifts per week. Tuesday was one of her days off, which she spent catching up on household chores, grocery shopping, and preparing meals for the week. "Mom, can I go outside?" Maddie asked, standing in the kitchen doorway and bouncing on her toes the way she always did when she was excited or impatient. Sheila looked up from the pot of spaghetti sauce she was stirring. "Dinner's going to be ready in about 45 minutes. Don't go far." "I won't. I'll just ride my bike around the block." "Stay where I can see you. And wear your helmet." "But Mom, helmets are dorky." "Madeline Ann Clifton, you wear the helmet or you don't ride the bike. Those are the rules." Maddie sighed dramatically. "Fine. Sure." She grabbed her pink bicycle helmet from the hook by the garage door, strapped it on, and headed outside. The helmet was decorated with stickers of butterflies and flowers that Maddie had carefully applied herself. She grabbed her purple bicycle, also covered in stickers, from the driveway and began pedaling up and down Glendale Avenue. Glendale Avenue was a quiet residential street, only 3 blocks long, with about 30 houses total. Most of the residents had lived there for years and knew each other well. The Cliftons had moved to the neighborhood in 1992, when Maddie was just 2 years old. Everyone knew the Clifton kids. Maddie, in particular, was a favorite among the neighbors because she was so friendly and outgoing. As Maddie rode her bike, she waved to neighbors. Mrs. Dorothy Strickland, a 72-year-old widow who lived 2 houses down at 4505 Glendale, was watering her flower garden and waved back. "Hi, Maddie." "Hi, Mrs. Strickland." Mr. Harold Jensen, who lived at 4507 Glendale, was walking his golden retriever, Max. Maddie stopped to pet the dog. "Can I walk Max with you?" "Not today, sweetie. Max needs his exercise, and I'm moving pretty fast. Maybe this weekend." "Okay." Maddie pedaled off, making loops up and down the street. At approximately 5:25 p.m., Maddie stopped in front of 4503 Glendale Avenue, the house directly across the street from her own home. This was the Phillips residence. The Phillips family had moved to Glendale Avenue in 1989. The father, Stephen Robert Phillips, was 44 years old and worked as an engineer at the Kennedy Space Center, a prestigious, well-paying job that required him to commute to Cape Canaveral several times a month. Steve was tall, 6 feet 2 inches, with graying brown hair and an imposing presence. Neighbors described him as intense and strict. He kept his lawn immaculate, his car spotless, and his family in line. The mother, Melissa Ann Phillips, was 41 years old and a homemaker. She had shoulder-length blonde hair, a soft-spoken demeanor, and a tendency to keep to herself. Neighbors rarely saw Melissa outside except when she was gardening or checking the mail. She seemed nervous, always looking over her shoulder, always hurrying back inside. And then there was their son, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips. Josh to everyone who knew him was 14 years old and a freshman at Inglewood High School. He'd been born on March 17, 1984, making him exactly 2 years older than Maddie, almost to the day. Josh was small for his age, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighing about 115 pounds with a slim, almost fragile build. He had sandy blonde hair that he kept short, blue eyes hidden behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a face that still had the soft, unformed features of a boy rather than a teenager. Josh was quiet, painfully quiet. Teachers described him as unremarkable, a C student who showed up, did the minimum required work, and never caused trouble. He'd played Little League baseball in elementary school and rec league soccer in middle school, but quit both by 8th grade. He had a few friends, mostly other quiet, nerdy kids, but wasn't part of any social circle. He didn't go to parties, he didn't date. He spent most of his time at home, in his room, playing video games or watching television. Neighbors described Josh as polite, but odd. He'd wave if you waved at him first, but he rarely initiated conversation. He didn't smile much. He walked with his head down, shoulders hunched, as if trying to make himself invisible. Some neighbors thought he was just shy. Others sensed something darker, a sadness, a tension, a fear. What the neighbors didn't know was that Josh lived in terror of his father. Steve Phillips was, by all accounts from those who would later testify, a strict disciplinarian who believed in corporal punishment. He demanded perfection from Josh. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect obedience. When Josh fell short, Steve would punish him, sometimes with harsh words that cut deeper than any physical blow, sometimes with his belt, sometimes with his fists. Melissa witnessed the abuse but felt powerless to stop it. She was terrified of Steve herself. She'd learned long ago that speaking up only made things worse. And Josh learned to survive by staying quiet, staying small, and staying out of his father's way. But on November 3, 1998, Josh's carefully constructed survival strategy would shatter, and an 8-year-old girl would pay the price. At 5:25 p.m., Maddie Clifton rode her bike up the driveway of 4503 Glendale Avenue and knocked on the front door. Melissa Phillips answered. She was wearing jeans and a Florida State University sweatshirt, and she had flour on her hands from baking cookies. "Hi, Maddie." "Hi, Mrs. Phillips. Is Josh home?" "He's in his room doing homework." "Why, sweetie?" "I wanted to see if he could come outside and play. We could ride bikes or play basketball or something." Melissa hesitated. "Why don't she wa?" Josh was 14. Maddie was 8. It was unusual for a high school freshman to play with a third grader. But Lakewood was the kind of neighborhood where kids of all ages played together. Pick-up basketball games, riding bikes in packs, playing hide-and-seek in the yards. And Josh had always been nice to the younger kids. He never teased them or excluded them the way some teenagers did. "Let me ask him," Melissa said. She walked down the hallway toward the back of the house and called out, "Josh, Maddie Clifton is here. She wants to know if you can play outside." There was a pause. Then Josh's voice, flat and quiet. Yeah. Sure. Just for a little while." Melissa returned to the front door. "He'll be right out." "Thanks, Mrs. Phillips." A moment later, Josh emerged from the house. He was wearing jeans, a gray t-shirt, and sneakers. He didn't make eye contact with Maddie, but he nodded. Hey, Josh, want to play basketball?" "I guess." "Your turn to be home first," Maddie declared, and took off running down the driveway. Josh followed at a slower pace. For the next 15 to 20 minutes, Josh and Maddie played in the Phillips driveway. Mrs. Strickland saw them shooting baskets. Mr. Jensen, returning from his walk with Max, saw them riding bikes up and down the street. Everything seemed normal. Two neighborhood kids playing on a beautiful afternoon. At approximately 5:45 p.m., both Josh and Maddie went inside the Phillips house. Mrs. Strickland, who was still working in her garden, saw them walk through the front door together. She assumed Melissa had called them in for a snack, or because it was getting close to dinner time. What happened next would remain a mystery for 7 agonizing days. Because Maddie Clifton never came home. 6:00 p.m. Maddie doesn't come home. At 6:00 p.m., Sheila Clifton walked to the front door of her house and called out, "Maddie, dinner!" No response. Sheila stepped onto the front porch and looked up and down the street. Maddie's purple bicycle was not in the driveway. Maddie herself was nowhere to be seen. Sheila called out louder, "Madeline, time to come in." Still no response. A small flutter of worry began in Sheila's chest. Maddie was usually very good about coming home when called. She might push the boundaries by a few minutes, but she always came home, especially when dinner was ready. Sheila walked down the driveway and looked both directions down Glendale Avenue. No sign of Maddie. No purple bicycle. No pink helmet. Sheila walked to the corner and called again, "Maddie!" Nothing. Nothing. Now the flutter of worry became a knot of anxiety. Sheila walked back to her house and grabbed her car keys. She drove slowly through the neighborhood, looking in driveways, checking the small park 2 blocks away where kids sometimes played. No Maddie. Sheila returned home and called her husband, Lawrence, who was still at his law office downtown. Lawrence Clifton was a partner at a mid-sized firm specializing in real estate law. He usually got home around 6:30 p.m. on weeknights. "Larry, Maddie's not home." "What do you mean she's not home? Where is she?" "I don't know. She went outside to ride her bike around 5:15. I called her for dinner at 6, but she didn't come. I drove around the neighborhood, but I can't find her." "Did you check with the neighbors?" "Not yet. I'm about to start knocking on doors." "I'm leaving now. I'll be home in 20 minutes. If you don't find her by then, we're calling the police." Sheila hung up and began walking door to door. She knocked on Mrs. Strickland's door first. "Dorothy, have you seen Maddie?" "Oh yes, dear, she was playing with the Phillips boy earlier. They were shooting baskets in his driveway. Then riding bikes. That was maybe 30 or 40 minutes ago." "Did you see where she went after that?" "No. I'm sorry, I came inside to start my own dinner, but she was with Josh Phillips. Maybe she's at their house." Sheila thanked Mrs. Strickland and walked across the street to 4000 Free Glendale Avenue. She knocked on the door. Melissa Phillips answered, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Hi, Sheila." "Hi, Melissa, I'm looking for Maddie. Is she here?" "Maddie, no. She and Josh played outside for a while earlier, but she left, say around 545 or so." "She left. Do you know where she went?" "No, I assumed she went back to your house. Josh came inside, and I thought Maddie did too, but to her own home. She never came home, and I can't find her anywhere." Melissa's expression changed from casual to concerned. "Oh my, have you checked the other neighbors?" Not yet, I'm about to. If you see her, please send her home immediately. Of course, I hope you find her soon. Sheila spent the next 20 minutes knocking on every door on Glendale Avenue. No one had seen Maddie since around 5:45 p.m. when she'd been playing with Josh. By 6:30 p.m., when Lawrence arrived home, Sheila was frantic. I can't find her anywhere. Larry, it's like she just vanished. Lawrence's face was grave. He was a lawyer, he knew statistics. He knew that the first few hours of a missing child case were critical. Call the police now. At 6:37 p.m., Sheila Clifton dialed 911. 911. Call transcript date, November 3, 1998. Time 6:37 p.m. Caller, Sheila Clifton. Location, 501 Glendale Avenue, Jacksonville, Florida. Dispatcher 911, what's your emergency? Sheila, my daughter is missing. She went outside to play over an hour ago, and she hasn't come home. I've looked everywhere, and I can't find her. Dispatcher, how old is your daughter, ma'am? Sheila, 8, Chaz. 8 years old. Dispatcher, and what's your daughter's name? Sheila Madeline Clifton. Everyone calls her Maddie. Dispatcher, okay. Mrs. Clifton, can you describe what Maddie was wearing? Sheila, voice shaking, a purple shirt with a butterfly on it, blue jeans, white sneakers, and a pink bicycle helmet. She was riding her purple bike. Dispatcher, when exactly did you last see her? Sheila, around 5:15. I let her go outside to ride her bike. She was supposed to stay on our street. I called her for dinner at 6, but she didn't come. I've been looking for her ever since. And Dispatcher, have you checked with neighbors? Sheila, yes. One neighbor saw her playing with a boy from across the street around 5:45, but no one's seen her since then. Dispatcher, okay. Mrs. Clifton, in dispatching officers to your location right now. They should be there within 10 minutes. In the meantime, I need you to stay at your house in case Maddie comes home. Can you do that? Sheila, yes, please. Hurry. Please find my baby. Dispatcher, we're doing everything we can, ma'am. Officers are on their way. Call ends, duration 2 minutes 43 seconds. The search begins November 3, 1998, 7:00 p.m. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office patrol units arrived at the Clifton residence at 6:52 p.m. Officers David Martinez and Jennifer Cole were the first on scene. They immediately began interviewing Sheila and Lawrence Clifton, gathering information about Maddie, her physical description, what she was wearing, where she'd last been seen, whether she had any reason to run away. She didn't whether there were any custody disputes or family conflicts. Whether there were in custody. Officer Martinez radioed for additional units and requested a supervisor. This was being treated as a critical missing child case. Time was of the essence. By 7:15 p.m., 6 patrol units were on scene. Officers began a systematic search of the neighborhood. They checked yards, looked in drainage ditches, searched the small retention pond 3 blocks away, knocked on every door, asking if anyone had seen Maddie. Asking if anyone had seen Maddie. By 7:45 p.m., Detective Richard Sheff of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Crimes Against Children arrived. Detective Sheff was a 22-year veteran of JSO, a tall man with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Head worked dozens of missing children are found safe within the first few hours. Usually they've gone to a friend's house. Within the first few hours, usually they've gone to a friend's. Detective Sheff's first step was to interview the Cliftons in detail. Sheff, Mr. and Mrs. Clifton, I need you to walk me through Maddie's day from the moment she woke up this morning. Sheila, she woke up at 7:00 a.m. I made her breakfast, cereal, and orange juice. She got dressed. I drove her to school. School starts at 8:15. Sheff, was anything unusual about her morning? Did she seem upset or worried about anything? Sheila, no, well, she was her normal self. Happy, chatty, excited because they were having pizza for lunch at school. Sheff, what time did she get home from school? Sheila, 3:30 p.m. The bus drops her off at the corner of our street. Sheff, And what did she do when she got home? Sheila. She had a snack, did her homework at the kitchen table. It took maybe 30 minutes. Then she asked if she could go outside to ride her bike. Chef. What time was that? Sheila. A little after 5:00. Maybe 5:15. Chef. And you gave her permission? Sheila. Yes. I told her to stay on our street and to wear her helmet. And to be back by 6:00 for dinner. Chef. Did Maddie have her bike with her when she left? Sheila. Yes. Her purple bike. Chef. And you haven't seen the bike either? Sheila. No, don't. Chef. Mrs. Clifton, one of your neighbors, told responding officers that she saw Maddie playing with a boy named Josh Phillips. Do you know Josh? Sheila. Yes. He lives across the street. He's a nice boy. A little quiet, but always polite. Maddie's played with him before. Chef. How old is Josh? Sheila. I think he's 14. He's in high school. Chef. Is it common for Maddie to play with teenagers? Sheila. Well, the neighborhood kids all play together. Ages don't really matter much when they're playing basketball or riding bikes. Josh has always been nice to Maddie. Chef. When was the last time anyone in your family actually saw Maddie? Sheila. I saw her ride off on her bike at 5:15. Mrs. Strickland saw her playing with Josh around 5:45. Chef. Has Maddie ever run away before? Sheila. No, Doward. Never. Never. She's a good kid. She follows the rules. Chef. Does Maddie have any friends in the neighborhood she might have gone to visit? Sheila. She has friends, but she knows she's supposed to tell me before going to anyone's house. And I've already checked with her closest friends. None of them have seen her. Chef. Mr. Clifton, is there anyone, family member, neighbor, stranger, who might want to harm Maddie or take her? Lawrence. No, sorry. No. Absolutely not. Maddie is loved by everyone. We don't have any custody issues, no restraining orders, no threats. This doesn't make any sense. Detective Chef made notes. Everything pointed to an abduction. But by whom? A stranger? Someone Maddie knew? His next step was to interview Josh Phillips. Interview #1. Josh Phillips, November 3rd, 1998, 8:30 p.m. Detective Chef and his partner, Detective Linda Moore, walked across Glendale Avenue to 4503 and knocked on the door. Steve Phillips answered. He was a large man, over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and an intense gaze. Yes? Detective Chef showed his badge. Mr. Phillips, I'm Detective Chef with JSO. We're investigating the disappearance of Maddie Clifton from across the street. I understand your son, Josh, was playing with Maddie earlier this evening. We'd like to speak with him. Steve's expression didn't change. Of course. Come in. The Phillips home was immaculate. Hardwood floors polished to a shine. Furniture precisely arranged, not a speck of dust visible. Family photos hung on the walls. Stiff, formal portraits where no one was smiling. Steve called down the hallway. Josh, the police are here to talk to you. Josh emerged from the back of the house. He was wearing the same gray t-shirt and jeans he'd had on earlier, though now he'd added a zip-up hoodie. He looked nervous, his hands shoved into his pockets. Josh, these detectives need to ask you some questions about Maddie Clifton. Answer them honestly. Yes, sir. The four of them sat in the living room. Josh on the couch between his parents, the detectives in chairs facing them. Chef, Josh, I understand you were playing with Maddie this afternoon. Can you tell me about that? Josh, quietly, yeah. She came over and asked if I wanted to play. We played basketball in the driveway for a while. Then we rode bikes. Chef, what time was this? Josh, I don't know exactly. Maybe 5:30. Chef, how long did you play together? Josh, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Chef, what happened after that? Josh, she said she had to go home for dinner. So she left. Chef. She left on her bike? Josh. Yeah. Chef. What direction did she go? Josh. Across the street. Toward her house. Chef. Did you see her actually make it to her house? Josh. Pause, I don't know. I came inside after she left. Chef. Josh, this is important. Did you see Maddie go inside her house? Josh. No, doubt. She rode across the street, and I came inside. I assume she went home. Chef. What time did you come inside? Josh. Maybe 5:45. Chef. And what did you do after you came inside? Josh. I went to my room. I did homework. Chef. Did you come out of your room at all after that? Josh. No, Donner. Not until my dad called me just now. Chef. Josh. Did Maddie seem upset or worried about anything when you were playing? Josh. No, doubt. She seemed normal. Happy. Chef. Did anyone else join you while you were playing? Josh. No, don't see. Just me and Maddie. Chef. Did you see anyone else on the street? Any cars driving by? Anyone watching you? Josh. I don't remember. I wasn't really paying attention. Chef. Josh. Do you have any idea where Maddie might have gone? Josh. Shaking his head. No. I really hope she's okay. Detective Chef studied Josh carefully. The boy seemed genuinely concerned, but there was something off. Josh wouldn't make eye contact. His answers were flat, rehearsed almost. But that could just be nervousness. Being interviewed by police would make any 14-year-old anxious. Chef. Mr. and Mrs. Phillips, have either of you seen Maddie this evening? Melissa. I saw her when she first came over. She knocked on the door and asked if Josh could play. I saw them in the driveway for a few minutes through the window. But then I went back to the kitchen. I was making dinner. Steve. I wasn't home. I got home from work around 6:00. Chef. Josh. One more question. Did Maddie come inside your house at any point? Josh. Pause. Then quickly no. We stayed outside the whole time. Detective Chef made a note of the hesitation but didn't press. He handed Steve Phillips his business card. If Josh remembers anything else, anything at all, please call me immediately. Even if it seems insignificant. We will, Steve said. As Detective Chef and Detective Moore walked back to their car, Moore said quietly, "What do you think?" "I think that kid is hiding something," Chef replied. "But I don't know what." November 3/10, 7 days of hell. The search for Maddie Clifton became one of the most intensive missing child searches in Jacksonville history. November 3rd, 8:00 p.m., midnight. Over 50 officers from JSO, Jacksonville Fire and Rescue, and neighboring agencies searched the Lakewood neighborhood. Search dogs were brought in and tracked Maddie's scent to the Phillips driveway, then lost the trail. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras scanned the area. The St. Johns River, located half a mile from the neighborhood, was searched by Marine units. November 4th, the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment CARD team arrived to assist. Over 500 volunteers joined the search, combing through woods, drainage ditches, abandoned buildings. Maddie's case was featured on local news stations across Florida. Flyers with Maddie's photo were distributed throughout Jacksonville. Missing child. Maddie Clifton, age 8 height, 40 weight, 52 pounds, brown hair, hazel eyes, last seen November 3, 5:45 p.m. Glendale Avenue, wearing purple butterfly shirt, blue jeans, white sneakers, pink bike helmet. If you have any information, call JSO 904. The Cliftons appeared on the local evening news, making a tearful plea for Maddie's safe return. Sheila Clifton. Crying Maddie, if you can see this, we love you so much. Please come home. And if someone has my baby, please, please let her go. She's just a little girl. She must be so scared. Please, Bring her home. November 5-6. Search expanded to a 5-mile radius. All registered sex offenders in the area were interviewed and their homes searched, with consent or warrants. Maddie's case was featured on America's Most Wanted. Psychics and psychic detectives from across the country contacted JSO, offering tips, none of which proved credible. The reward for information leading to Maddie's safe return reached $50,000. November 7-9. Despite the massive search effort, no trace of Maddie was found. No witnesses came forward with useful information. Hope began to fade. Local churches held prayer vigils. Southside Elementary School held an assembly where students made cards and drawings for Maddie. Grief counselors were brought in to help Maddie's classmates cope. By November 10th, 7 days after Maddie's disappearance, most people believed she was dead. The only question was, who took her, and where was her body? The answer was closer than anyone imagined. The discovery, November 10th, 1998. November 10th, 1998, was another unseasonably warm day in Jacksonville. The search for Maddie continued, though with fewer volunteers. Many people had to return to work and their normal lives. The Clifton family remained in agony, clinging to hope but preparing for the worst. At 4503 Glendale Avenue, the Phillips family tried to return to normalcy. Steve had returned to work. Josh had gone back to school on November 9th, enduring stares and whispers from classmates who knew he'd been one of the last people to see Maddie alive. And Melissa Phillips had been noticing a smell. It had started a few days after Maddie's disappearance, a faint, unpleasant odor that Melissa initially attributed to something in the trash, or perhaps a dead animal that had died in the crawl space under the house. But over the past few days, the smell had gotten worse. Much worse. By November 10th, the smell was overwhelming, particularly in the back of the house, near Josh's bedroom. Melissa had mentioned it to Steve on November 9th. There's an awful smell coming from Josh's room. I think maybe an animal died in the walls or something. It's probably just his dirty laundry, Steve had replied dismissively. He never cleans his room. Tell him to do his laundry. But Melissa knew the difference between dirty laundry and the smell of decay. This was the latter. Having worked briefly as a nurse's aide in her 20s, Melissa recognized the sickly sweet, nauseating scent of decomposition. On November 10th, while Josh was at school and Steve was at work, Melissa decided to find the source of the smell. She gathered her cleaning supplies, gloves, trash bags, air freshener, and opened the door to Josh's bedroom. The smell hit her like a physical wall. She gagged and covered her nose and mouth with her hand. Josh's room was at the back corner of the house, a modest 12x12 space with a single window that looked out onto the backyard. The room was messy, but not unusually so for a teenage boy. Clothes on the floor, books and papers scattered on the desk, posters of sports teams and bands on the walls. The centerpiece of the room was Josh's bed, a waterbed with a wooden platform frame. Waterbed platforms typically have storage space underneath, either drawers or an open compartment. Josh's platform had both, 2 large drawers on either side and an open space in the middle, accessed by lifting a panel. The smell was definitely coming from the bed. Melissa's first thought was that perhaps a rat or a possum had crawled under the platform and died. It wouldn't be the first time. Florida homes, especially older ones, often had problems with wildlife getting inside. Melissa opened one of the drawers on the left side of the platform. It was filled with Josh's off-season clothes, shorts and t-shirts that wouldn't be needed until spring. The smell was stronger here, but the drawer itself seemed normal. She opened the second drawer. More clothes. But the smell was overpowering now. Then Melissa noticed that the panel covering the center compartment under the waterbed wasn't quite flush with the frame. It was slightly askew, as if someone had recently opened it and not properly secured it. Melissa knelt down, held her breath, and lifted the panel. And she screamed. Inside the compartment, wedged into the narrow space beneath the waterbed mattress, was a child's body. It was Maddie Clifton. Maddie was lying on her side, her knees pulled up to her chest in a fetal position, her arms tucked against her body. She was still wearing the purple butterfly shirt and blue jeans she'd had on when she disappeared 7 days ago. Her face was turned toward the wall, her long brown hair covering her features. Her skin had taken on the grayish-blue pallor of death and early decomposition. Melissa stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. But it was. The little girl everyone had been searching for, the little girl whose face was on flyers all over Jacksonville, whose parents had been on television begging for her safe return. That little girl had been in Melissa's house the entire time, in her son's bedroom, under his bed. For 7 days, Melissa's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees on the floor of Josh's bedroom, sobbing. Her mind raced through the implications. Josh had been in this room every night for the past 7 days. He'd slept on this bed. He'd done homework at the desk. He'd watched television, all while Maddie's body was decomposing underneath him. Oh my God. Oh my God. What did my son do? Melissa crawled out of Josh's room on her hands and knees, unable to stand. She reached the hallway, grabbed the wall phone, and with shaking hands, dialed 911. 911, call transcript date. November 10th, 1998 time. 2:14 p.m. Caller, Melissa Phillips location, 4503 Glendale Avenue, Jacksonville, Florida, Florida. Dispatcher. 911, what's your emergency? Melissa, hyperventilating. Oh my God. Oh my God. There's a body. There's a body in my house. Dispatcher. Ma'am, please slow down. What's your address? Melissa. 4503 Glendale Avenue. Please send someone. Please. Dispatcher. Ma'am, you said there's a body? Are you sure? Melissa. Sobbing, yes. Yes. It's the little girl. Maddie, White. The one who's been missing. She's under my son's bed. She's dead. Dispatcher. The missing girl, Maddie Clifton, is in your home. Melissa. Yes. Oh God. Did my son do this? I can't. Dispatcher. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Police and paramedics are being dispatched to your location right now. Where is your son? Melissa. At school. He's at school. Oh my God. What did he do? Dispatcher. Ma'am, are you alone in the house right now? Melissa. Yes. My husband's at work. Dispatcher. Okay. I need you to go outside and wait for the police. Do not touch anything in that room. Do you understand? Melissa. Incoherent sobbing. Dispatcher. Mrs. Phillips. Can you hear me? Melissa. I can't believe this. I can't believe my son could do this. Dispatcher. Ma'am, please go outside and wait. Officers will be there in less than 3 minutes. Melissa. Okay. Okay. Call ends. Duration. 3 minutes, 12 seconds. 2:17 p.m. Police arrive. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office patrol units arrived at 4503 Glendale Avenue at 2:17 p.m., just 3 minutes after Melissa's 911 call. Officers David Martinez and Jennifer Cole, the same officers who had responded to the initial missing child call 7 days earlier, were among the first on scene. They found Melissa Phillips on the front lawn, on her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Officer Martinez approached cautiously. Mrs. Phillips, I'm Officer Martinez. We spoke last week about Maddie Clifton. You called 911 and said you found a body? Melissa looked up, her face streaked with tears. In my son's room, under his bed. It's Maddie. She's been there the whole time. Officer Cole radioed for backup homicide detectives, crime scene investigators, the medical examiner. Then she said gently to Melissa, Mrs. Phillips, I need you to stay right here. Don't go back inside. Can you do that? Melissa nodded, unable to speak. Officer Martinez and Officer Cole entered the house, following standard protocol for a potential crime scene. They moved quickly but carefully down the hallway to the back bedroom. The smell was horrific, the unmistakable scent of decomposition. Officer Martinez pushed open the door to Josh's room and immediately saw the lifted panel on the waterbed platform. He approached slowly, knelt down, and looked into the compartment beneath the bed. Maddie Clifton's body lay exactly as Melissa had described. Officer Martinez had been a police officer for 12 years. He'd seen a lot of terrible things. But this, a child's body, hidden in a bedroom for 7 days, while everyone searched desperately for her. This was one of the worst scenes he'd ever witnessed. "It's her," Martinez said quietly to his partner. "It's Maddie Clifton." Within 10 minutes, Glendale Avenue was swarming with police cars, crime scene vans, and news media. Word had spread quickly. Maddie Clifton's body had been found. Across the street, Sheila and Lawrence Clifton heard the commotion. They stepped onto their front porch and saw the police activity at the Phillips house. Sheila's heart sank. She knew. Even before Detective Sheff walked across the street to tell them, she knew. Detective Richard Sheff, who had been coordinating the search for Maddie for the past 7 days, arrived at the Phillips house at 2:35 p.m. UND. He was briefed by the patrol officers, then entered Josh's bedroom to assess the scene himself. The bedroom was small and ordinary. Nothing about it screamed murder scene. But beneath the waterbed, hidden in a space no more than 12 inches high and 5 feet wide, was the body of an 8-year-old girl. Detective Sheff felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief that Maddie had been found. Her parents would at least have closure, would be able to bury their daughter. Rage that she'd been here all along, while hundreds of people searched, while her family suffered. And the suspect was obvious. Joshua Phillips. "Get units to Inglewood High School immediately," Detective Sheff ordered. "Find Josh Phillips and bring him in. I want him in custody within the hour." 3:15 p.m. Josh's arrest. At 3:15 p.m., Detective Sheff and Detective Moore arrived at Inglewood High School. They went directly to the principal's office and explained the situation. The principal, Dr. Susan Hartley, was horrified but cooperative. "Josh Phillips is in 6th period, American History, room 214. I'll have someone bring him to the office." A few minutes later, Josh walked into the principal's office. He looked confused and nervous. When he saw the detectives, his face went pale. "Josh, I'm Detective Sheff. You remember me from last week?" "Yes." "Josh, I need you to come with us to the police station. We have some questions about Maddie Clifton." "Did you find her?" "Yes, Josh. We found her." Josh's face showed no emotion. "Is she okay?" Detective Sheff paused. Was this kid serious? Or was he playing dumb? "No, Josh. She's not okay. She's dead." "Oh." Josh looked down at his shoes. "Josh, we found Maddie's body in your bedroom. Under your bed." Josh said nothing. "Josh, do you understand what I'm telling you? We found Maddie's body in your room. I want to talk to my dad. We'll call your parents from the station, but right now, I need you to come with us." Josh nodded. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't resist. He simply stood up and walked out of the school between the two detectives, as students and teachers stared in shock. Josh was handcuffed, standard procedure for a murder suspect, and placed in the back of Detective Sheff's unmarked car. As they drove to the JSO headquarters downtown, Detective Sheff watched Josh in the rearview mirror. The kid was calm. Too calm. Eerily calm. He stared out the window, his expression blank, as if he were on a routine trip to the grocery store rather than being arrested for murder. What the hell happened in that house? Detective Sheff thought. And why did this kid kill an 8-year-old girl? The confession, November 10th, 1998, 4:00 p.m. The interrogation room at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was small, windowless, and deliberately uncomfortable. A metal table bolted to the floor. 4 chairs. a camera mounted in the corner, fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered slightly. Josh Phillips sat on one side of the table, his hands resting in his lap. He'd been read his Miranda rights and understood them. His parents had been contacted and were on their way, but Josh had waived his right to have them present before questioning. He said he wanted to get it over with. Detective Richard Sheff and Detective Linda Moore sat across from Josh. On the table between them was a yellow legal pad, a pen, and a tape recorder. Detective Sheff pressed the record button. "Sheff, this is Detective Richard Sheff, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, badge number 2547. Also present is Detective Linda Moore, badge number 3891. We are interviewing Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, date of birth March 17th, 1984. The date is November 10th, 1998. The time is 4:07 p.m. Josh, you've been read your Miranda rights and you've indicated that you understand them. Is that correct?" Josh: "Yes." "Sheff, and you've agreed to speak with us without an attorney present. Is that correct?" Josh: "Yes." "Sheff: "Okay. Josh, I want you to tell us, in your own words, what happened on November 3rd. Start from the beginning." Josh took a breath. Then he began to speak, his voice quiet but steady. "Josh, Maddie came over around 5:00 or 5:30. She asked if I wanted to play. We played basketball for a while. Then we rode bikes." "Sheff, how long did you play?" "Josh, maybe 20 minutes. "Sheff, then what happened?" "Josh, she said she wanted to see my room. She asked if I had any video games. I told her I had some. So we went inside." "Sheff: Josh, last week when we interviewed you at your house, you told us that Maddie never came inside. You said you stayed outside the whole time, and then she went home. Was that a lie?" "Josh, pause, yes." "Sheff, why did you lie?" "Josh, because I didn't want anyone to know she'd been in my room." "Sheff: Okay. So Maddie came into your room. What happened next?" "Josh, we were just talking, looking at stuff. She was leaning over my bed, looking at my baseball card collection on the shelf. And I don't know why I hit her." "Sheff, you hit her? With what?" "Josh, with my hand. On the back of the head. Not super hard, but hard enough that she fell forward onto the bed." "Sheff, why did you hit her?" "Josh, long pause, I don't know. I just did." "Sheff, Josh, you must have had a reason." "Josh, quietly, I don't know. I wasn't thinking. Normal and I did her. It just happened." "Sheff, what happened after you hit her?" "Josh, she started crying. Really loud. She said, 'Why did you do that?' I'm telling. And I panicked. I knew if she told, my dad would kill me." "Sheff, your dad would kill you?" "Josh, not literally. But he'd beat me. He'd be so mad. He hates when I do anything wrong." "Sheff, so what did you do?" "Josh, I tried to get her to stop crying. I put my hand over her mouth. She was squirming, trying to get away. I told her to be quiet, but she kept trying to scream. So I put my hands around her neck." "Sheff, you strangled her." "Josh," voice breaking, "I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to stop crying. But she kept struggling, and then she stopped moving." "Sheff, how long did you have your hands around her neck?" "Josh, I don't know. Maybe a minute. It felt like forever." "Sheff, and then what happened?" "Josh, I let go. I checked to see if she was breathing. She wasn't. I tried to do CPR like they taught us in health class. I did chest compressions. I tried mouth to mouth, but nothing worked. She was dead." "Sheff, what did you do then?" "Josh, crying now, I didn't know what to do. I knew I'd be in so much trouble. My dad I can't even imagine what he'd do. So, I panicked. I didn't know what to do with the body. Chef, Josh, we need to know everything. What did you do with Maddie's body? Josh, barely audible, I hid her. Chef, where? Josh, under my bed. In the compartment, under the waterbed platform. Chef, was she alive when you put her there? Josh, no. She was already dead. Chef, Josh, the medical examiner is going to do an autopsy. They're going to examine Maddie's body carefully. Are you telling us the complete truth about what happened? Josh, pause, there's more. Chef, tell us. Josh, after I hid her under the bed, I realized there was blood on the floor. And I was worried someone would smell, you know. So I tried to clean up. I used towels and bleach. Then I put heavy things on top of the platform to keep the smell down. Chef, what kind of heavy things? Josh, books, weights, whatever I could find. Chef, Josh, I need to ask you this directly. Did you sexually assault Maddie? Josh, no. I swear I didn't. Nothing like that happened. Chef, did you hit Maddie more than once? Josh, long pause, maybe. I don't remember exactly. Everything happened so fast. Chef, Josh, this is important. You need to tell us the truth. Did you hit Maddie multiple times? Did you use any objects to hit her? Josh, quietly, I might have hit her a few times. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. Chef, what about a knife? Did you use a knife? Josh, shocked, what? No. Why would I use a knife? Chef, I'm asking you, Josh. Did you stab Maddie? Josh, no. I swear. I never stabbed her. Detective Chef made notes. The autopsy would reveal the full truth. For now, he moved on. Chef, Josh, after you hid Maddie's body, what did you do? Josh, I went back out to the living room. My mom was making dinner. She asked where Maddie went, and I said she went home. Chef, and your mom believed you? Josh, yeah. She didn't know Maddie had been in my room. Chef, over the next 7 days, Maddie's family was searching desperately for her. The whole neighborhood was searching. Did you ever think about telling someone where she was? Josh, crying every day, every single day. But I was too scared. I knew once I told, everything would be over. My life would be over. Chef, Josh, did you watch the news coverage about Maddie? Josh, yes. Chef, how did that make you feel? Josh, terrible. I felt so bad for her parents, but I couldn't tell. I just couldn't. Chef, Josh, for 7 days you slept in that room. You did homework in that room. You lived in that room with Maddie's body decomposing under your bed. How did you do that? Josh, voice flat, I just did. I tried not to think about it. I tried to pretend it didn't happen. Chef, did you ever think about moving the body somewhere else? Josh, I thought about it, but I didn't know where I could put her without getting caught. So I just left her there. Chef, Josh, do you understand that what you did was wrong? Josh, sobbing, yes. I know. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop crying. And then everything spiraled out of control. Chef, do you have anything else you want to tell us? Josh, shaking his head, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The confession lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, Detective Chef turned off the tape recorder and sat back. Josh had confessed to killing Maddie Clifton. He admitted hitting her, strangling her, and hiding her body. But Detective Chef knew there was more to the story. The autopsy would likely reveal injuries Josh hadn't mentioned, possibly because he didn't remember them, or possibly because he was still lying. At 5:15 p.m., Steve and Melissa Phillips arrived at GSO headquarters. They were escorted to a separate room and briefed on Josh's confession. Steve's reaction was cold anger. Melissa sobbed. At 6:30 p.m., Josh was formally charged with first-degree murder. He was transported to the Duval County Juvenile Detention Center, where he would be held pending trial. At 7:00 p.m., Detective Sheff drove to the Clifton residence to inform Maddie's parents that their daughter's body had been found and that a suspect, Josh Phillips, had confessed to killing her. The Cliftons' grief was overwhelming, but at least they had answers. At least they could bring Maddie home. Part 4. The Autopsy. What really happened to Maddie? On November 11, 1998, Dr. Marcia Lipkowitz, the medical examiner for Duval County, performed the autopsy on Madeline Ann Clifton. Dr. Lipkowitz was a forensic pathologist with 20 years of experience. She'd performed over 3,000 autopsies. But this case was especially difficult. Not just because the victim was a child, but because the body had been concealed in a hot, enclosed space for 7 days, resulting in significant decomposition that complicated the examination. The autopsy took 4 hours. Dr. Lipkowitz's findings were meticulous and horrifying. External examination. Female child, age 8, height 48 inches, weight 52 pounds. Advanced decomposition consistent with approximately 7 days post-mortem in a warm, enclosed environment. Clothing: purple shirt, blue jeans, white sock shoes removed by suspect. Evidence of lividity and rigor mortis resolved due to decomposition. Injuries: head and face. 7 distinct blunt force trauma injuries to the skull, concentrated at the posterior back and right lateral side regions. Depressed skull fracture at the right temporal bone. Fracture to the right orbital bone eye socket. Extensive bruising and laceration to the scalp. Subdural hematoma bleeding between skull and brain. Injuries: neck. Extensive bruising and petechial hemorrhaging around the neck, consistent with manual strangulation. Fractured hyoid bone, small bone, in throat. This injury is rare in children and indicates significant force. Crushed larynx voice box. Injuries: torso. 11 stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. 3 wounds penetrated the heart. 4 wounds penetrated the lungs. 2 wounds penetrated the liver. 2 wounds were superficial, did not penetrate organs. Pattern of wounds consistent with a single-edged blade, approximately 4-5 inches in length. Injuries: extremities. Defensive wounds on both hands and forearms. Cuts and bruises consistent with attempting to fend off an attacker. Bruising on both wrists, consistent with being grabbed forcefully. Toxicology: no drugs or alcohol detected. Cause of death. Dr. Lipkowitz concluded that Maddie died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head, manual strangulation, and multiple stab wounds. The manner of death was homicide. Time of death. Based on decomposition and witness statements, Dr. Lipkowitz estimated Maddie died between 5:45 p.m. and 6:15 p.m. on November 3, 1998. Sequence of events reconstructed from injuries. Dr. Lipkowitz testified that the injuries indicated the following sequence. Maddie was struck multiple times in the head with significant force, likely with Josh's fists or possibly an object. She was manually strangled, Josh's hands around her neck, for approximately 1-3 minutes. After strangulation, she was stabbed 11 times with a knife. The defensive wounds indicate Maddie was conscious and fighting during at least part of the attack. Critical finding: the stab wounds were inflicted post-mortem, after death, or peri-mortem, at the moment of death. This meant that Maddie was likely already unconscious or dead when Josh stabbed her. Why would Josh stab Maddie if she was already dead? Dr. Lipkowitz speculated that Josh may have been making sure she was dead, or he may have been in a state of panic and rage that continued even after Maddie stopped moving. The autopsy findings contradicted parts of Josh's confession. He had admitted hitting Maddie once and strangling her. But he'd denied hitting her multiple times and had explicitly denied stabbing her. The physical evidence told a different story. This was a brutal, sustained attack that lasted several minutes. The knife. During the crime scene investigation of Josh's bedroom, investigators found a knife hidden in the back of Josh's closet, wrapped in a towel. The knife was an 8-inch kitchen knife with a single-edged blade, matching the dimensions of the wounds on Maddie's body. Blood evidence on the knife was tested and matched Maddie's DNA. Josh had lied. He had stabbed Maddie, and he'd hidden the murder weapon in his closet, just feet away from where he'd hidden Maddie's body. The decision to try Josh as an adult. Under Florida law in 1998, juveniles as young as 14 could be charged as adults for serious crimes, including murder. The decision rested with the state attorney's office. State Attorney Harry Shorstein was a career prosecutor with a reputation for being tough on crime. He'd held the position of state attorney for Florida's 4th Judicial Circuit since 1991. But even for Shorstein, a hardened veteran of hundreds of murder trials, the Phillips case was difficult. On one hand, the crime was undeniably heinous. An 8-year-old girl had been beaten, strangled, and stabbed, then hidden under a bed for 7 days. The perpetrator showed no remorse during those 7 days. He attended school, ate dinner with his family, and watched news coverage of the search, all while Maddie's body decomposed in his bedroom. On the other hand, the perpetrator was 14 years old, a child himself, legally speaking, and Florida law required prosecutors to consider several factors before charging a juvenile as an adult: the seriousness of the offense, the juvenile's age and maturity, the juvenile's prior record, the likelihood of rehabilitation, public safety concerns. On November 15, 1998, State Attorney Shorstein held a press conference to announce his decision. After careful review of the evidence and consultation with Dr. Lipkowitz, the medical examiner, and Detective Sheff, the lead investigator, I have decided to charge Joshua Phillips as an adult with first-degree murder. This was not a decision I made lightly. Joshua Phillips is 14 years old. Under normal circumstances, I would prefer to handle juvenile offenders in the juvenile justice system, where rehabilitation is the primary goal. But this case is not normal. The evidence shows that Joshua Phillips beat, strangled, and stabbed Maddie Clifton. He then hid her body and went about his life for 7 days while her family suffered. The brutality of this crime, combined with Joshua's lack of remorse and his deliberate concealment of evidence, demonstrates a level of sophistication and depravity that warrants adult prosecution. If convicted, Joshua Phillips will face a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. This decision was made in consultation with the Clifton family, who support adult prosecution. I want to be clear. This is not about revenge. This is about justice. Maddie Clifton deserves justice, and the people of Jacksonville deserve to know that someone who commits such a horrific crime will be held accountable, regardless of age. The decision sparked immediate controversy. Those who supported trying Josh as an adult argued the crime was too brutal to be handled in juvenile court. Josh's actions after the murder, hiding the body, lying to police, showed adult-level reasoning. Juvenile facilities could only hold offenders until age 21, which was insufficient for a murder conviction. Public safety required that Josh be locked away for life. Those who opposed trying Josh as an adult argued Josh was only 14, a child whose brain was still developing. Brain science shows that teenagers lack full impulse control and cannot fully appreciate consequences. Josh had no prior criminal record. There was evidence that Josh was abused by his father, which could explain his violent outburst. Trying children as adults violates their constitutional rights to rehabilitation. Child advocacy groups, including the Children's Defense Fund and the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, filed amicus briefs arguing that Josh should be tried as a juvenile. They cited studies showing that adolescent brains are not fully developed, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which governs impulse control and decision-making. But the court sided with the prosecution. On December 18, 1998, Judge R. Hudson Olive ruled that Joshua Phillips would be tried as an adult. While the court acknowledges the defendant's age and the evolving understanding of adolescent brain development, Judge Olive wrote in his order, "The nature of this offense, the level of violence, the premeditation involved in obtaining and using a knife, and the deliberate concealment of the body demonstrates a maturity of judgment that warrants adult prosecution." This court finds that the interests of justice and public safety require that this case proceed in adult criminal court. Josh's trial was set for July 6, 1999. If convicted, Joshua Phillips would spend the rest of his life in prison. The trial begins July 6, 1999. On the morning of July 6, 1999, 8 months after Maddie's murder, the trial of Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips began in the 4th Judicial Circuit Court in Jacksonville, Florida. The courthouse, located in downtown Jacksonville at 330 East Bay Street, was a stately building with marble floors, high ceilings, and an air of solemnity befitting the administration of justice. But on this day, the solemnity was overshadowed by chaos. The case had attracted intense media attention. Not just local, but national, and even international. News vans lined the street. Reporters from CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, Court TV, and dozens of local stations jostled for position. Courtroom sketch artists set up their easels. Photographers with telephoto lenses waited outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Josh or the Clifton family arriving. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Courtroom 4B, where the trial would take place, had seating for approximately 100 spectators. Every seat was filled. The gallery was divided, unofficially, into two sides. One side for Maddie's family and supporters, the other for Josh's family and supporters, though Josh had very few. On the left side of the gallery sat Lawrence and Sheila Clifton, flanked by their older children, Jesse and Patricia. Sheila wore all black and clutched a framed photo of Maddie, a school picture from the previous spring, showing Maddie's bright smile and sparkling eyes. Next to the Cliftons sat members of the extended family, friends, and representatives from victims' rights organizations. On the right side of the gallery sat Steve and Melissa Phillips. They looked haggard, broken. Steve's face was drawn and emotionless, his jaw clenched. Melissa's eyes were red from months of crying. They sat alone, no extended family, no friend. The community had turned against them. Their son was accused of murder, and by extension, they were seen as failures as parents. At the front of the courtroom, separated by the bar, were the attorneys. For the state of Florida, lead prosecutor, Assistant State Attorney Christian Ellerbe, age 43, a 15-year veteran of the state attorney's office with a reputation for being tough, methodical, and highly effective in front of juries. She had prosecuted over 50 homicide cases with a conviction rate above 90%. Second chair, Assistant State Attorney Michael Denton, age 35, specializing in forensic evidence and crime scene reconstruction. For the defense, lead attorney, Public Defender Richard Nichols, age 51, a 22-year veteran of the Public Defender's Office who specialized in juvenile cases. Nichols was passionate about juvenile justice reform and believed deeply that children, even those who commit terrible crimes, deserve a chance at rehabilitation. Second chair, Assistant Public Defender Laura Henderson, age 32, specializing in psychological defenses and mitigation. At the defense table sat Joshua Phillips, now 15 years old. He'd spent the past 8 months in the Duval County Jail. Juveniles charged as adults are housed separately from adult inmates, but in adult facilities. Josh had grown slightly. He was now about 5 feet 6 inches and maybe 125 pounds. His hair was longer than it had been at the time of his arrest. He wore a navy blue suit that his mother had purchased for the trial, a white shirt, and a tie. He looked young, vulnerable, like a boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Josh kept his eyes down, staring at the table in front of him. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at the Cliftons. He barely moved. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the bailiff stood. All rise. The Fourth Judicial Circuit Court of Florida is now in session. The Honorable R. Hudson Olive presiding. Judge Olive entered from his chambers. He was 61 years old, with white hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a stern but fair demeanor. He'd been a circuit court judge for 19 years and had presided over some of Jacksonville's most high-profile cases. But this case, a 14-year-old on trial for murdering an 8-year-old, was unlike anything he'd encountered. "Please be seated," Judge Olive said. He surveyed the packed courtroom. "Before we begin, I want to address everyone present. This is a court of law, not a spectacle. I will not tolerate outbursts, emotional displays, or any behavior that disrupts these proceedings. Anyone who cannot control themselves will be removed from the courtroom. Is that understood?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the gallery. "Good. We are here for the trial of Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, who is charged with first-degree murder in the death of Madeline Ann Clifton. The defendant has entered a plea of not guilty. We will begin with jury selection." Jury selection. July 6, 1999. Jury selection in a high-profile case is always challenging. In Josh's case, it was extraordinarily difficult. The case had been covered extensively in local media for the past 8 months. Almost everyone in Jacksonville had heard about it, and most had formed an opinion. Over the course of 2 weeks, attorneys questioned over 300 potential jurors. Many were dismissed for cause. They'd already decided Josh was guilty based on media coverage. Others were dismissed because they couldn't consider imposing a life sentence on a teenager. Still, others were dismissed because they couldn't be fair to either side. The process was grueling. Each side had a limited number of peremptory challenges, dismissals without needing to state a reason, and they used them strategically. The prosecution looked for jurors who believed in personal responsibility regardless of age, could set aside sympathy for Josh's youth, understood that some crimes are so serious that age doesn't matter, could follow the law even if they disagreed with trying juveniles as adults. The defense looked for jurors who had sympathy for juvenile defendants, understood adolescent brain development, believed in rehabilitation over punishment, could consider mitigating factors. Josh's age, possible abuse at home, lack of prior criminal record. By July 20th, 1999, they had their jury. 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 27 to 64. The jury was racially diverse, economically diverse, and ideologically diverse, exactly what both sides wanted for different reasons. Judge Olive swore in the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have been selected to serve on a jury in a first-degree murder trial. You will hear evidence, evaluate witness credibility, and ultimately decide whether the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You must set aside any preconceptions, any sympathy for either the victim or the defendant, and base your verdict solely on the evidence presented in this courtroom. Do you solemnly swear to do so?" "We do," the 12 jurors responded in unison. "Very well. We will begin opening statements tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. Jurors, you are instructed not to discuss this case with anyone, not to read news coverage, not to conduct your own research. Any violation of these instructions will result in your removal from the jury. Court is adjourned until tomorrow." The gavel fell. Josh was led back to his holding cell. The Clifton family left through a side exit to avoid the media. The Phillips family remained seated, staring straight ahead, until the courtroom emptied. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Opening statements. July 21st, 1999. The courtroom was even more packed on the second day of trial. Every journalist who'd been lucky enough to secure a press pass was present. Court TV was broadcasting the trial live, with a 5-minute delay. Sketch artists sat in the front row, their hands moving rapidly across their pads. Opening statement. Prosecution. Christine Ellerbe walked slowly to the center of the courtroom, positioning herself equidistant between the jury box and the defense table. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She carried no notes. She'd memorized every word she was about to say. She looked at each juror, making eye contact, letting the silence build. Then she began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on November 3, 1998, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton did something she'd done 100 times before. She rode her bike to a neighbor's house and asked if a friend could come out to play. That neighbor was Joshua Phillips, 14 years old. A boy Maddie trusted. A boy she looked up to. A boy who lived right across the street from her. Maddie was excited. She and Josh played basketball. They rode bikes. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. But then Josh invited Maddie inside his house, into his bedroom. And what happened next is the reason we're all here today. Joshua Phillips beat Maddie Clifton. He struck her in the head at least 7 times. He strangled her with his bare hands until the bones in her throat broke. And then, after she was unconscious, or possibly already dead, he stabbed her 11 times with a kitchen knife. 11 times. Let me repeat that. 11 stab wounds. To the chest. To the abdomen. Penetrating her heart, her lungs, her liver. Does that sound like an accident to you? Does that sound like a 14-year-old who panicked and didn't know what he was doing? No. Ty. That's murder. Brutal, calculated, intentional murder. And after Joshua killed Maddie, he hid her body under his bed. Then he went about his life as if nothing had happened. For 7 days, while Maddie's parents searched desperately, while hundreds of volunteers combed through woods and drainage ditches, while the entire city of Jacksonville held its breath, hoping for Maddie's safe return. For 7 days, Joshua Phillips slept in that room, did homework in that room, watched television in that room, all while Maddie's body decomposed just feet away. When police first interviewed Joshua on November 3rd, the very same day Maddie went missing, he lied. He told detectives that Maddie had never been inside his house. He said she went home around 5:45 p.m. That was a lie, and Joshua knew it was a lie. On November 10th, when Maddie's body was discovered and Joshua was confronted with the truth, he finally confessed. But even his confession was a lie. He admitted hitting Maddie once. He admitted strangling her. But he denied stabbing her. Why would he lie about the stabbing? Because he knew how bad it looked. He knew that stabbing an 8-year-old girl 11 times is not something you do by accident. It's not something you do in a panic. It's something you do intentionally. Now, over the next several days, the defense is going to try to make you feel sorry for Joshua. They're going to tell you he's just a kid. They're going to tell you he was abused by his father. They're going to tell you his brain isn't fully developed and he couldn't understand what he was doing. But I want you to remember something. Maddie Clifton was a kid too. She was 8 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. She was trusting, innocent, and full of joy. And Joshua took that away from her. Maddie's parents will never see her graduate from high school. They'll never walk her down the aisle at her wedding. They'll never meet their grandchildren, because Joshua Phillips murdered their daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of this trial, after you've heard all the evidence, I'm going to ask you to return a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. Not because Joshua is a monster, though what he did was monstrous. Not because we don't care about troubled teenagers, though Joshua's troubles don't excuse what he did, but because the evidence will prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that Joshua Phillips intentionally and premeditatedly killed Maddie Clifton. And intentional, premeditated killing is called murder in the first degree. Thank you. Ellerbe returned to her seat. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were visibly emotional. Sheila Clifton was crying quietly, her husband's arm around her shoulders. Judge Olive turned to the defense table. Mr. Nichols, your opening statement. Opening statement. Defense. Richard Nichols stood. Unlike Ellerbe, he carried a notepad, though he referred to it only occasionally. He walked toward the jury, but not as close as Ellerbe had stood. He wanted to seem less aggressive, more empathetic. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Richard Nichols, and I represent Joshua Phillips. And I want to start by acknowledging something that Ms. Ellerbe said. This is a tragedy, an absolute heartbreaking tragedy. Maddie Clifton was a beautiful, innocent child whose life was cut short, and my client, Joshua Phillips, is responsible for her death. Joshua has never denied that. From the moment he was confronted with the truth, he admitted what he did. He has expressed remorse. He understands that his actions resulted in Maddie's death, and he will carry that guilt for the rest of his life. But the question before you is not whether Joshua caused Maddie's death. The question is, did he commit first-degree murder? Did he plan to kill Maddie? Did he act with premeditation and malice? The prosecution wants you to believe that Joshua is a cold-blooded killer, that he lured Maddie into his room, attacked her brutally, and then hid her body without remorse. But the evidence will tell you a very different story. The evidence will show you that Joshua Phillips is a deeply troubled boy who has lived in fear his entire life. You're going to hear from psychologists, from teachers, from neighbors, that Joshua's father, Steve Phillips, is a harsh, controlling man who demands perfection and punishes any deviation with physical and emotional abuse. Joshua has been beaten by his father since he was old enough to remember. He's been called names, belittled, made to feel worthless. And he's learned that the only way to survive in his house is to stay quiet, stay small, and never, ever make a mistake. On November 3rd, Joshua and Maddie were in Joshua's room looking at baseball cards. They were playing around, the way kids do. And Joshua accidentally pushed Maddie. She hit her head on the bed frame. She started crying, and in that moment, Joshua wasn't thinking about Maddie. He was thinking about his father. He was thinking about the beating he would get if his father found out that he'd hurt the neighbor's kid. So Joshua panicked. He tried to quiet Maddie. He put his hand over her mouth. She struggled, and in his panic, his terror, he strangled her. Did he intend to kill her? No. He intended to keep her quiet so his father wouldn't find out. But he's 14 years old. He doesn't understand his own strength. He doesn't understand that what he's doing could be fatal. And when Maddie stopped moving, Joshua realized what he'd done. He tried to revive her. He did CPR, but it didn't work. She was gone. Now, the prosecution is going to point to the stab wounds and say, that proves premeditation. But the evidence will show that the stab wounds occurred after Maddie was already dead or dying. Joshua, in a state of absolute panic and terror, stabbed her body, not out of malice, but out of a desperate, irrational belief that he needed to make sure she was dead so she couldn't tell anyone what happened. Does that make sense to an adult? No, it doesn't. But Joshua isn't an adult. He's a child with an underdeveloped brain, a child who's been abused his entire life, a child who made a catastrophic mistake. The prosecution is charging Joshua with first-degree murder, which requires premeditation. But there was no premeditation here. Joshua didn't plan to hurt Maddie. He didn't bring her to his room with the intent to kill her. What happened was an accident that spiraled into a nightmare. At most, this is second-degree murder, an impulsive killing without premeditation, or even manslaughter, an unintentional killing that occurred during the commission of another act. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not asking you to excuse what Joshua did. I'm asking you to understand it, to see it for what it really was, a tragic mistake made by a terrified, abused child. Joshua Phillips deserves to be held accountable, but he also deserves to be treated as what he is, a child, not an adult, not a cold-blooded killer. At the end of this trial, I'm going to ask you to return a verdict that reflects the truth, that Joshua is guilty of a terrible act, but not of first-degree murder. Thank you. Oh. Nichols returned to his seat. Several jurors were nodding slightly, Had they been swayed by the defense's framing of Josh as a victim himself? Only time would tell. The prosecution's case. July 22, August 3, 1999. Over the next 10 days, the prosecution called 23 witnesses. Their goal: to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Josh Phillips murdered Maddie Clifton with premeditation and malice. Witness #1, Sheila Clifton, Maddie's mother. Sheila Clifton was the first witness called. She wore a black dress and clutched the framed photo of Maddie that she'd been holding throughout the trial. Her voice shook as she was sworn in. "Ellerbe, Mrs. Clifton, thank you for being here. I know this is incredibly difficult. Can you tell the jury about Maddie?" Sheila, crying, "Maddie was the light of our lives. She was sweet, funny, outgoing." Ellerbe, did Maddie know the defendant, Joshua Phillips? Sheila, yes. Josh lived across the street. Maddie liked him. She thought he was nice. She'd played with him before. Ellerbe, Mrs. Clifton, on November 3, 1998, when Maddie didn't come home for dinner, what did you do? Sheila, I searched everywhere. I called her name. I drove around the neighborhood. Then I called the police. Ellerbe, did you ever suspect that Maddie might be at the Phillips house? Sheila, I asked Melissa, Josh's mother, if Maddie was there. She said no, that Maddie had left around 5:45. I believed her. I never imagined. Breaks down sobbing. Ellerbe, take your time, Mrs. Clifton. Sheila, composing herself, I never imagined that Maddie was dead, and that she was just across the street the whole time. Ellerbe, Mrs. Clifton, how has Maddie's death affected your family? Sheila, crying, it destroyed us. My husband and I barely speak anymore. My son had to go to therapy. My daughter can't sleep. Every day I wake up and for a split second I forget, and then I remember that my baby is gone, and I'll never see her again. Ellerbe, thank you, Mrs. Clifton. No further questions. Nichols chose not to cross-examine. There was nothing to gain from questioning a grieving mother. Witness #5, Dr. Marcia Lipkowitz, medical examiner. Dr. Lipkowitz's testimony was the most damning for the defense. She walked the jury through the autopsy findings, using diagrams and photographs, which were shown only to the jury, not the gallery, due to their graphic nature. Ellerbe, Dr. Lipkowitz, what was the cause of Maddie's death? Lipkowitz, Madeline died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head, manual strangulation, and multiple stab wounds. Ellerbe, can you describe the blunt force injuries? Lipkowitz, Maddie sustained 7 distinct impacts to her head, specifically to the back and right side of her skull. These injuries caused skull fractures and bleeding in the brain. Ellerbe, could these injuries have been caused by a single fall or accident? Lipkowitz, no. The pattern and severity of the injuries are consistent with repeated blows, not a single impact. Ellerbe, what about the strangulation? Lipkowitz, Maddie was manually strangled, meaning someone used their hands to compress her neck. The force was significant enough to fracture her hyoid bone, which is rare in children because their bones are more flexible. This indicates sustained forceful pressure on the neck. Ellerbe, and the stab wounds? Lipkowitz, Maddie sustained 11 stab wounds to her chest and abdomen. 3 penetrated her heart. 4 penetrated her lungs. 2 penetrated her liver. These wounds were inflicted with a single-edged blade approximately 4 to 5 inches in length. Ellerbe, Dr. Lipkowitz, in your expert opinion, how long would this attack have lasted? Lipkowitz, based on the number and pattern of injuries, I estimate the attack lasted at least 3 to 5 minutes, possibly longer. Ellerbe, so this was not a brief impulsive act? Lipkowitz, no, but this was a sustained attack. Ellerbe, one final question, Dr. Duro. Were the stab wounds inflicted while Maddie was alive or after she was dead? Lipkowitz, based on the blood loss patterns, and the lack of significant hemorrhaging in some wounds. I believe most of the stab wounds were inflicted peri-mortem, at or very near the moment of death. Some may have been post-mortem, but Maddie was likely still alive when the stabbing began. Several jurors looked visibly shaken. One juror, a woman in her 30s, wiped tears from her eyes. On cross-examination, Nichols tried to establish that the attack was impulsive rather than planned. Nichols: Dr. Lipkowitz, you testified that the attack lasted 3 to 5 minutes. Is it possible that those were 5 minutes of panic, not 5 minutes of calculated murder? Lipkowitz: I can't speak to the defendant's mental state. I can only describe the physical injuries. Nichols: But the injuries themselves don't tell you whether the defendant planned to kill Maddie, do they? Lipkowitz: Correct. The injuries tell me how Maddie died, not why. Nichols: Thank you, Doctor. Witness #9. Detective Richard Sheff. Detective Sheff testified about the investigation, Josh's initial lies, and his eventual confession. Ellerbay: Detective Sheff, when you first interviewed Joshua Phillips on November 3rd, what did he tell you? Sheff: He said that he and Maddie had played outside, and then she went home around 5:45 p.m. He claimed she never came into his house. Ellerbay: Was that true? Sheff: No. We later learned that Maddie did go into Josh's house, into his bedroom. Ellerbay: When did Josh admit the truth? Sheff: On November 10th, after Maddie's body was discovered. Ellerbay: And what did he say in his confession? Sheff: He admitted hitting Maddie, strangling her, hiding her body, and, initially, denied stabbing her. When confronted with the autopsy findings, he acknowledged that he might have stabbed her, but claimed he didn't remember clearly. Ellerbay: Detective, in your professional opinion, did Joshua Phillips show remorse during the 7 days before Maddie's body was discovered? Nichols: Objection. Calls for speculation. Judge Olive: Sustained. Ellerbay: Let me rephrase. Detective Sheff, did Joshua Phillips at any point during those 7 days voluntarily tell anyone where Maddie's body was? Sheff: No. Ellerbay: Did he participate in the search efforts? Sheff: No. Ellerbay: Did he come forward and confess? Sheff: No. He only confessed after the body was discovered, and he had no other option. Ellerbay: Thank you, Detective. Witness #15. Melissa Phillips, Josh's mother. The prosecution called Melissa Phillips a risky move that could backfire if the jury felt sympathy for her as the mother of the accused. But Ellerbay needed Melissa to establish the timeline and to counter the defense's narrative about Steve Phillips' abuse. Ellerbay: Mrs. Phillips, on November 3rd, 1998, do you remember Maddie Clifton coming to your house? Melissa: Quietly, yes. She knocked on the door and asked if Josh could play. Ellerbay: And did he? Melissa: Yes. They went outside. Ellerbay: Did you see them come back inside? Melissa: Yes. Around 5:45 p.m. Ellerbay: Did you know that Maddie went into Josh's bedroom? Melissa, crying no do to his e. I thought they were in the living room or the kitchen. I was making dinner. I didn't realize. Ellerbay: Mrs. Phillips, over the next 7 days, did you notice anything unusual about Josh's behavior? Melissa: No, see. He seemed normal. Ellerbay: Did you notice a smell in his room? Melissa: Yes. It got worse each day, but I thought it was dirty laundry or something. I never imagined. Ellerbay: Mrs. Phillips, you discovered Maddie's body. Can you describe that? Melissa: Barely able to speak, I was cleaning Josh's room. The smell was so bad. I opened the compartment under his bed, and breaks down on one. Ellerbay: Thank you, Mrs. Phillips. No further questions. On cross, Nichols tried to use Melissa to establish Steve's abuse. Nichols: Mrs. Phillips, Is your husband physically abusive toward Josh? Melissa. Dave is strict. Nichols. Does he hit Josh? Melissa. Sometimes. When Josh misbehaves. Nichols. With his hand or with objects? Melissa. Sometimes with a belt. Nichols. Does Josh fear his father? Melissa, crying. Yes. Nichols. Thank you. The prosecution rested on August 3, 1999, after 10 days of testimony. They had established. Josh lied to police initially. Maddie was beaten, strangled, and stabbed in a sustained attack. Josh hid the body and showed no remorse for 7 days. The crime scene evidence matched Josh's confession. Now the defense had to convince the jury that Josh deserved mercy. Part 9. The defense's case, August 4-10, 1999. Richard Nichols called 9 witnesses over 5 days. His strategy: humanize Josh, establish the abuse he'd suffered, and argue that this was not premeditated murder. Witness #2. Dr. Michael Brannon, forensic psychologist. Dr. Brannon had evaluated Josh in April 1999 and found him to be immature, traumatized, and suffering from an abusive home environment. Nichols. Dr. Brannon. What is your professional assessment of Joshua Phillips? Brannon. Josh is an immature 14-year-old with significant emotional and psychological issues stemming from chronic abuse at home. Nichols. Can you elaborate? Brannon. Josh has been subjected to physical punishment and emotional abuse by his father for most of his life. This has created a heightened fear response. Josh makes decisions based on avoiding punishment rather than considering moral consequences. Nichols. In your professional opinion, when Josh hurt Maddie, was he thinking about killing her? Or was he thinking about something else? Brannon. Based on my evaluation, I believe Josh was thinking about his father. He was terrified of what his father would do if he found out Josh had hurt Maddie. That fear drove his actions. Nichols. Does that excuse what Josh did? Brannon. No, though. But it provides context. Josh is not a psychopath. He's not a cold-blooded killer. He's a traumatized child who made a catastrophic mistake. On cross, Ellerbe challenged this. Ellerbe. Dr. Brannon. You said Josh made his decisions based on fear of punishment. But he had 7 days to confess. His father couldn't punish him if he confessed to police, could he? Brannon. Josh's fear was irrational. But that's the nature of trauma. He wasn't thinking logically. Ellerbe. For 7 days? Brannon. Pause of fear can be paralyzing. Witness #6. Joshua Phillips. On August 9, 1999, Josh took the stand. It was a huge risk. Putting the defendant on the stand always is. But Nichols believed the jury needed to hear from Josh directly. Josh walked slowly to the witness stand. He looked terrified. He was sworn in, and Nichols began. Nichols. Josh, I know this is hard, but I need you to tell the jury what happened on November 3rd. Josh. Quietly, Maddie and I were in my room. We were looking at stuff. I pushed her, and she hit her head on the bed frame. She started crying really loud. Nichols. What were you thinking in that moment? Josh. I was scared my dad would hear. He gets really mad when I mess up. I thought he'd beat me. Nichols. What did you do? Josh. I tried to make Maddie stop crying. I put my hand over her mouth. But she kept crying, so I put my hands on her neck. I just wanted her to be quiet. But I didn't mean to hurt her. Nichols. Josh, did you intend to kill Maddie? Josh, crying. Nabardaro tonati. Never. Never. I just panicked. Nichols. What about the stab wounds? Josh, sobbing. I don't remember doing that. I was in shock. I think I don't know. Nichols. Josh, do you regret what you did? Josh, barely audible, every day. I'm so sorry. On cross-examination, Ellerbe was relentless. Ellerbe, Josh, you said you panicked, but you were calm enough to hide Maddie's body, weren't you? Josh, I was scared. Ellerbe, you were calm enough to lie to Detective Chef when he interviewed you. Josh, yes. Ellerbe, you were calm enough to go to school the next day and act normal? Josh, I was trying to act normal. Ellerbe, for 7 days. Josh, no responsa. Ellerbe, Josh, you stabbed Maddie 11 times. 11 times. How do you do that by accident? Josh, crying. I don't know. Ellerbe, did Maddie beg you to stop? Josh, I don't remember. Ellerbe, you don't remember? Josh, sobbing, no do I doubt. Ellerbe, Josh, do you think Maddie's parents will ever forgive you? Nichols, objection. Judge Olive, sustained. Miss Ellerbe, move on. Ellerbe, no further questions. The defense rested on August 10, 1999. Now it came down to closing arguments. Closing arguments, verdict, and sentencing. Closing argument. Prosecution, August 11, 1999. Christine Ellerbe delivered the prosecution's closing argument with controlled passion. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the evidence, and the evidence is overwhelming. Joshua Phillips murdered Maddie Clifton. He beat her. He strangled her. He stabbed her 11 times. Then he hid her body and lied to everyone for 7 days. The defense wants you to believe this was an accident. But accidents don't involve 11 stab wounds. Accidents don't involve hiding a body and lying to police. Josh had 7 days to do the right thing. 7 days to confess. 7 days to give Maddie's family closure. But he chose to stay silent. That's not panic. That's calculation. That's murder. Find Josh Phillips guilty of first-degree murder. Because that's what he is. A murderer. Closing argument. Defense. August 11, 1999. Richard Nichols pleaded for mercy. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Phillips killed Maddie Clifton. He admits it. He's never denied it. But was it first-degree murder? No. It was a tragic mistake made by a terrified, abused child. Josh deserves accountability. But he also deserves a chance at redemption. Find him guilty of second-degree murder or manslaughter, not first-degree. The verdict, August 12, 1999. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. At 4:47 p.m. they returned. We find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Josh collapsed. His mother wailed. The Clifton family wept with relief. Sentencing. September 10, 1999. Judge Olive sentenced Josh to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your life in prison. May God have mercy on your soul. Where is Joshua Phillips now? Josh is now 40 years old, incarcerated at Marion Correctional Institution in Florida. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life without parole for juveniles is unconstitutional. Josh had a resentencing hearing in 2017. He was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. He is eligible for his first parole hearing in 2025.